Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins. The road to Eldenwald wound through a valley of whispering reeds and swaying birches, silvered beneath the pale light of a waning moon. Geralt of Rivia rode in silence, his horse, Roach, stepping carefully along the narrow, muddy path. Behind him came Dandelion, strumming his lute and humming the beginnings of a ballad that had no tune yet and far too many rhymes. "Tell me, Witcher," Dandelion said at last, breaking the hush of the night, "do you ever tire of all this gloom? The still air, the empty roads, the constant scent of rot and rain? Wouldn't you rather be in a warm inn with a mug of mulled wine and the company of gentle ladies who appreciate your rugged charm?" Geralt didn't answer. He nudged Roach forward, the horse's hooves squelching in the damp earth. "I'll take that as a no," Dandelion muttered, pulling his cloak tighter. "Honestly, Geralt, if not for me, you'd forget what a good laugh sounds like. And where are we headed again? Ah, yes, Eldenwald. A noble's manor, an audience, an eager crowd. They say Lord Rensel adores poetry. If I play my cards right, I might just secure a patron. Imagine that. Gold, luxury, and no more sleeping under trees." Geralt cast him a sidelong glance. "We'll see if you're still saying that after you meet him." Dandelion blinked. "You've heard of the man?" "Only rumors," Geralt said. "None good." The bard sighed dramatically. "Rumors are just jealous words. Nobles and poets are misunderstood souls. We share the same curse. No one truly appreciates our genius." Geralt's lips curved faintly, the barest hint of amusement. "Except yours tends to get you into trouble." "And yours tends to get you out of it," Dandelion replied quickly, grinning. They reached the crest of a hill, and Eldenwald came into view. A cluster of thatched roofs and crooked chimneys. Beyond it loomed the remains of an old elven tower, its spire cracked and leaning like the finger of some long-dead giant, pointing toward the heavens. Even from afar it seemed to brood over the village, its presence cold and watchful. A mist coiled around its base, pale and unnatural. Dandelion's voice faltered. "Tell me that's not where we're going." Geralt didn't answer. He merely urged Roach down the slope toward the sleeping town. By dawn they had found an inn, the Silver Heron, a modest place smelling faintly of smoke and boiled cabbage. The innkeeper, a broad woman with arms like rolling pins, greeted them with wary politeness. She knew what Geralt was the moment she saw his eyes. "A witcher," she murmured. "Well, there's work aplenty if you don't mind ghosts." Dandelion perked up. "Ghosts, you say? How thrilling. Tell us everything, dear lady." The woman crossed herself and leaned closer. "Folks say the old tower's haunted. Nights ago a milkmaid vanished by the river, then 2 shepherds, then old Bram, the miller. Only their shadows were found, shapes in the mud as if burned there by moonlight. The elders say it's the White Lady, the spirit of a noble woman wronged long ago." "White Lady," Geralt repeated quietly. "A noon wraith, perhaps, or worse." The innkeeper nodded. "Whatever it is, it's cursed ground. Lord Rensel sent soldiers once to search the ruins. Not one came back." Dandelion's excitement wilted into unease. "Well, perhaps my performance could be postponed. A prudent bard knows when to make an exit." Geralt ignored him. "I'll take a look in the morning." That night, As rain pattered softly on the shutters, the Witcher sat by the hearth, sharpening his swords in the glow of the fire. Dandelion lay stretched on the bench, snoring faintly, his lute cradled like a lover. The Witcher's silver blade gleamed, its edge keen enough to part hair from skin. Beyond the glass, the tower's silhouette rose black against the stormy sky. He could feel it, even from here. Something restless, something ancient. Not a mere haunting, but a wound left open too long. At dawn, they rode toward the ruins. The tower stood at the edge of a withered orchard. Its stones were slick with moss, its archway draped in vines. The air was heavy, still, unnaturally quiet. Not even the wind stirred the grass. Dandelion swallowed hard. "You're sure about this?" Geralt dismounted. "Stay with Roach and keep your mouth shut." The bard nodded quickly, clutching his lute as if it could protect him. Geralt stepped through the archway. Inside, the light dimmed to a silvery haze. He could see faint shapes, scattered bones, fragments of rusted armor, a broken sword half buried in dust. Then a whisper brushed his ear, soft as a sigh. "Leave this place." He turned. The air shimmered. A figure took form, a woman in tattered white, her hair drifting as if underwater. Her eyes burned with hollow light. "Who bound you here?" Geralt asked calmly. The wraith's mouth opened, and a sound escaped. Half sob, half shriek. The tower trembled. Outside, Dandelion yelped as the horses reared. "Geralt, whatever you're doing, do it quickly!" But the Witcher was already moving, drawing a circle in the dust, his signs flaring blue. "Yrden!" The specter recoiled, hissing as the air shimmered with magic. And then, for a heartbeat, Geralt saw her as she had been, a young woman in fine silk, eyes full of terror, blood on her throat. A name escaped her lips, barely a breath. "Rensel." The glow faded. The spirit vanished. The tower fell silent once more. Geralt straightened, slowly frowning. Behind him, Dandelion approached cautiously, peering into the doorway. "Well, is it gone?" "For now," Geralt said, "but this curse runs deep, and I think your noble patron has a great deal to answer for." Dandelion paled. "Unfortunate." Geralt sheathed his sword and looked toward the distant manor, its banners fluttering faintly in the breeze. "We'll pay Lord Rensel a visit." And as they set off through the misty fields, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, pale and uncertain. The road ahead, however, promised no peace, only secrets buried under centuries of silence, and the song that would soon follow. The path to Lord Rensel's manor wound through dense oak woods, the trees pressing close like silent sentinels. The morning mist clung to the branches, and the damp earth smelled of decay and rain. Dandelion kept glancing about nervously, his hand never straying far from his lute, though it was as useful as a feather in battle. Geralt rode ahead, silent, his expression set in stone. The manor soon emerged from the fog, a sprawling estate perched upon a low hill, its walls of pale limestone streaked with moss. Once, it must have been beautiful, but now the shutters hung crooked, and the gate bore the scars of rust and neglect. 2 guards stood at the entrance, wearing mismatched armor and the weary look of men who'd seen too many dull days. "Halt," one said, lowering a spear. "State your business." Dandelion, ever the diplomat, swept into a bow that nearly sent his hat tumbling into the mud. "Good sirs, I am Julian Alfred Pancratz, Viscount de Lettenhove, poet and minstrel of renown throughout Redania, Kedwin, and parts of Temeria. Though modesty forbids me to boast further, I am expected by your lord." The guards exchanged doubtful looks. "And the Witcher?" Geralt met their gaze evenly. Bodyguard? They hesitated. A witcher's reputation carried both awe and unease. Finally, one muttered, "Fine, go in, but keep your weapons sheathed." As they entered the courtyard, Dandelion leaned toward Geralt. "Bodyguard? Really? It makes me sound important." "It makes you sound reckless," Geralt replied. The bard grinned. It sharpens the rhyme. Inside the manor, they were greeted by a steward, a thin, pale man with a face like parchment. He led them through a long hall, lined with faded portraits. Dust clung to every corner, and the air was heavy with neglect. Lord Rensel awaited them in what had once been a grand chamber, though now its splendor was dimmed by time. Rensel was a man in his middle years, broad-shouldered with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His doublet was fine but threadbare at the seams, and his fingers toyed restlessly with a gold ring. "So," he said, rising as they entered, "the poet arrives, and with quite the companion." His gaze lingered on Geralt. "A witcher, if I'm not mistaken. What brings you to my doorstep, mutant?" Geralt's tone was even. "Work? I hear your lands are troubled by a curse." The lord's mouth tightened. "You hear much, it seems. Tales which grow like weeds. Superstitious nonsense from the peasantry. There's no curse." Dandelion stepped forward with his most winning smile. "Your lordship, I assure you, our interest is purely artistic. I was told your court appreciates fine music and verse. I've traveled far, through storm and hardship, to bring song to your noble hall." Rensel's hard eyes softened slightly. "You've courage, bard. Few come to Eldenwald willingly. Very well, you shall perform tonight. Perhaps your music will lift the gloom of this place." Dandelion bowed again, relief flooding his face. "Your generosity honors me." As they were shown to their chambers, Geralt paused at a window overlooking the fields. The old tower loomed in the distance, half shrouded in mist. He could feel it again, a pulse in the air, faint but insistent. Something bound there still lingered, something unwilling to rest. Later, in the dim corridors, the witcher wandered alone. He passed servants who avoided his gaze, whispers trailing in his wake. From behind a half-open door, he caught a murmur, a woman's voice. "She comes at night," the voice said, "white as death. We hear her crying near the orchard." Another answered, "Hush, speak of her, and she'll find you." Geralt moved on, silent as shadow. By evening, the manor filled with the flicker of candlelight and the murmur of conversation. Dandelion, resplendent in purple velvet, took his place by the hearth. He tuned his lute, struck a chord, and began a lively tune, one about love, wine, and improbable heroics. Laughter rose among the gathered guests. Even Rensel allowed himself a thin smile. But amid the music, Geralt's eyes never left the lord. He studied the man's every movement, every fleeting shadow that crossed his face. When the song ended and the applause faded, Geralt approached quietly. "You've a fine ear for music, my lord," he said. "Tell me, do you also have a taste for truth?" Rensel's smile thinned. "Meaning?" Geralt's tone was calm, but his words struck like steel. "The spirit haunting your lands, the one the villagers call the White Lady. She named you?" A silence fell. Only the crackle of the fire broke it. "I see," Rensel said at last, his voice low. "Then you should know this, Witcher. She was my betrothed years ago. She died before the wedding. An accident. The peasants weaved their tales, but there was no curse. Let the dead rest, An accident? Geralt's eyes narrowed. She died with blood on her throat. The Lord rose sharply. Enough! I will not be accused in my own hall. If you wish to chase phantoms, do so elsewhere. Geralt turned without a word and left. Behind him, Dandelion stammered an apology and hurried after. They returned to their chamber, the bard's voice rising in protest. Geralt, must you always offend potential patrons? I was this close to a proper feast. She wasn't lying, Geralt said quietly. The spirit said his name. Whatever happened here, it wasn't an accident. Dandelion sighed. Then we're staying until I find the truth. That night, the storm returned. Wind clawed at the shutters, and thunder rolled across the hills. Geralt sat by the window, watching the old tower through the rain. A faint glow shimmered near its base, white and wavering. He stood, strapping on his swords. Going out again? Dandelion asked sleepily. At this hour? There's no hour for the dead, Geralt replied, opening the door. The bard groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. If I die of fright, I hope you'll at least put me in a song. Geralt smiled faintly and stepped into the storm. The path to the tower was slick with mud, the air thick with mist. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant he saw her, standing among the ruins, her form radiant, her face twisted in sorrow. She turned toward him, and her voice carried through the wind. He promised me forever, and gave me death. The Witcher drew his silver blade. Then I'll make him remember. And with that, he stepped into the light. Rain hissed softly upon the broken stones of the tower as Geralt crossed its threshold once more. The world within seemed unchanged, yet subtly wrong. Time here had lost its rhythm. The same shattered sword still lay by the doorway, but the moss that clung to it now glowed faintly, as if touched by moonlight from another realm. The Witcher moved soundlessly. The sigil of Yrden shimmered again beneath his boots, casting faint violet ripples through the gloom. Every instinct told him this was no simple haunting. A noon wraith, bound to such a place, would linger under the sun, not in the rain-swept night. This spirit defied pattern. Something or someone had twisted her essence. From the shadows came a sound like weeping. Geralt turned slowly, hand on the hilt of his sword. The figure emerged from the gloom, the white lady, her garments torn and drifting like mist. Her eyes, yet her voice when she spoke, was not the shriek of a wraith, but the trembling whisper of a woman, half remembered by the world. Why does he still live? She murmured. Why does he feast and drink while I wander in cold silence? Geralt stepped closer, careful not to break the fragile stillness. Who wronged you? Her form flickered. A memory surfaced. A banquet hall filled with laughter, goblets raised, a young woman in a gown of silver thread. Then a cry, a flash of steel, and red upon white silk. Rensel, she said, the name dripping like venom. He swore to love me. He swore upon the moon. And then he killed me. The Witcher's eyes narrowed. A curse born of betrayal then. But how was it bound here? The spirit's face twisted. He hid my bones, buried them beneath the tower. He thought that would silence me. Geralt sheathed his sword and knelt, tracing the dusty floor with his gloved fingers. Your remains hold you to this world. I can free you, but I'll need to find them first. Her gaze fixed upon him, her voice trembling like wind over glass. Free me, Witcher, and I shall bring you truth. But beware. He watches. His men will not let you leave this place alive. Then she vanished, leaving only the chill of her presence behind. Geralt stood, eyes thoughtful. He marked the spot where her image had lingered, then turned back toward the door. By the time he returned to the manor, dawn had begun to break, thin and cold. The guards at the gate eyed him warily, but said nothing. Inside, the corridors were silent, save for a faint sound echoing down the hall. It was music, faint and uncertain. Dandelion was awake. The bard sat by the hearth, strumming idly, his hair disheveled and his eyes heavy with fatigue. "You look as though you've walked through the graveyard itself," he said. "Found anything?" "More than I hoped," Geralt replied. "She was murdered. Rensel killed her and buried the body beneath the old tower. Saints preserve us. You're certain?" "Certain enough." Geralt began cleaning his sword, methodically wiping the silver blade. "We'll need to dig, but not alone. There's a man who knows more, the steward. He's been here longer than any of the servants." The bard grimaced. "You mean the one who looks as though he's been embalmed?" "The same." They found the steward near the kitchen, bent over an account book. When Geralt's shadow fell across the table, he stiffened. "You serve Lord Rensel," Geralt said without preamble. "You served his father before him, didn't you?" The man's parchment face tightened. "I did? What of it?" "You were here when Lady Alara died." At the mention of the name, the steward's quill snapped. Ink spread across the parchment like spilled blood. He rose slowly, his voice a whisper. "You should not speak of her." "Then tell me what happened," Geralt said quietly, "because her spirit won't rest until the truth does." The old man hesitated, his eyes darting toward the doorway as if fearing unseen ears. Finally, he spoke. "It was no accident. The lady discovered a letter meant for another woman. The Lord's mistress, a Nilfgaardian envoy's daughter. There was a quarrel. He struck her. She fell and did not rise again." Dandelion swallowed hard. "And then?" "He buried her himself in the ruins of her family's tower and forbade us to speak of it. Those who did vanished soon after. I stayed silent, as all cowards do." Geralt nodded once. "You'll show me where." The steward trembled. "If he learns I helped you, then you'll have justice before the Witcher leaves these lands," Geralt said simply. "Swear it?" The man hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Meet me by the orchard when night falls." By afternoon, the manor had changed. Servants moved nervously, whispers followed every footstep, and Rensel himself grew curt. His Dandelion did his best to distract suspicion, performing in the courtyard, singing bawdy songs that earned nervous laughter. As twilight deepened, Geralt waited by the orchard, cloaked in mist. The steward came, carrying a lantern that shook in his trembling hand. Without a word, he led the Witcher toward the tower. The air grew colder as they neared. The lantern light flickered against the wet stones, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms. "Here," the old man said hoarsely, pointing to a patch of earth near the foundation. "He dug here that night." Geralt knelt and brushed away the moss. The soil was loose, recently disturbed. Someone else had been here. He frowned. "We're not alone." From the darkness, a voice rang out. "Step away from there, Witcher." Soldiers emerged from the trees, cloaked and armed, their blades gleaming in the lamplight. Rensel himself stepped forward, rain dripping from his cloak. "I warned you to leave this matter alone," the Lord said coldly, "but you had to dig where you shouldn't." Geralt rose slowly, his hand on his sword. "You killed her, and now you mean to silence her again," Rensel sneered. "She was weak. She would have ruined everything. I did what I must, and I'll not have some mutant dragging my sins into daylight." He raised a hand. "Kill him?" Steel rasped. The guards moved in. Geralt's silver blade flashed, catching the lantern's glow. The first man fell before he'd taken a step, throat cut cleanly. Another lunged. Geralt sidestepped, drove his pommel into the man's jaw, and sent him sprawling. Sparks flared as swords met, ringing through the storm. The steward fled into the darkness. Rensel, pale and furious, drew his own blade and charged. He was skilled, but anger made him reckless. Geralt parried easily, twisting aside. "You'll hang for this," Rensel spat. "No," Geralt said, voice low. "You already did." At that moment, the earth beneath the tower trembled. Light burst from the ground, the air filled with a woman's scream, long and shattering. The soldiers fell back in terror as the White Lady rose from the soil, her form blazing with spectral fury. "Rensel," she cried, her voice echoing across the fields, "you swore to love me." The Lord stumbled backward, face contorted with fear. "No, stay back." But the wraith reached him, her hands like mist and flame. She touched his chest, and his scream joined hers as the life drained from his eyes. When the light faded, he was gone, only ash upon the wet grass. The White Lady turned to Geralt. Her form shimmered, gentler now. "Thank you, Witcher. The pain is ended." Geralt bowed his head. "May you find peace." With a final sigh, she vanished. The storm broke. Rain washed the blood from the stones, leaving the ground clean and still. Dandelion arrived moments later, panting, soaked to the bone. "Geralt, what in all the hell's happened?" The Witcher sheathed his sword. "Justice?" The bard looked at the scorched ground, at the fading traces of light. "I suppose that's one word for it. Remind me never to cross you when love's involved." Geralt said nothing. The dawn came gray and quiet over Eldenwald, carrying with it a silence that was, at last, free of ghosts. But even as they left the manor behind, Dandelion was already humming, words forming under his breath. He sang of a lord undone by his own sin, a spirit bound by love and vengeance, and a witcher who walked through darkness to set her free. The sun had barely risen above the gray horizon when Geralt and Dandelion left Eldenwald behind. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed clean stillness, the kind that follows both battle and revelation. The road ahead wound through dew-drenched meadows and silent woods, their leaves glittering with rain. For a long while neither spoke. Dandelion rode hunched in his saddle, cloak soaked and lute wrapped. His face bore none of the usual cheer, though his lips moved faintly, forming the beginnings of verse. Geralt, as always, rode in silence, his gaze fixed upon the path ahead. At length, Dandelion sighed. "You know," he began, "I've written countless songs about love, betrayal, and ghosts, but it's quite different seeing it with one's own eyes." Geralt said nothing. The bard went on. "You think you've captured sorrow in rhyme until you meet it in the flesh. That poor woman, bound for years, all because of one man's pride. There's something cruel about that, don't you think?" "There's always cruelty," Geralt said quietly. "Men call it by other names, justice, passion, duty, but it's cruelty all the same." Dandelion looked at him sidelong. "You sound like you're about to write a poem yourself." Geralt almost smiled. "Leave the poetry to you." They rode on. By midday they reached the crossroads near a forest inn known as the Stag and Boar. Smoke rose from its chimney, promising warmth and food. Dandelion brightened at once. "Now that," he declared, "is a sight for sore eyes. Roast goose, perhaps? A flagon of ale? Maybe two? Geralt dismounted first. We'll stop long enough to eat and rest the horses. Then we move on. Inside, the inn was bustling. Merchants crowded around the hearth. Guardsmen dozed at their table, and the smell of baked bread filled the air. The innkeeper, a stout man with a beard like tangled rope, greeted them warily until he saw the Witcher's medallion glint beneath his cloak. Then his tone softened, tinged with respect. Room or meal? Both, Dandelion answered before Geralt could speak. And a warm bath if you've one to spare. The man chuckled. Aye, Bard. You'll have it. They ate in a corner by the window where the light fell soft through rain-streaked glass. Geralt tore at his bread absently while Dandelion devoured his meat.
You know, the bard said between bites, I think I'll compose something truly magnificent about Eldenwald, something haunting yet heroic. The Lady in the Tower, perhaps? Geralt grunted. Make sure you leave my name out of it. As always, Dandelion said cheerfully, but you'll be there all the same, hidden between the lines. My listeners are clever, they'll know. Their quiet meal was interrupted when a man burst through the door, his cloak torn, his face pale with panic. He stumbled toward the counter, gasping, Bandits! On the road to Vizima! They took the wagons and killed the guards! A murmur spread through the inn. One of the merchants cursed softly. That's the third attack this month. Geralt looked up. Where exactly? Near the ford by Oak Hollow, the man said, shuddering. They came out of nowhere, like ghosts, led by some woman in black armor, eyes like ice. Dandelion frowned. A woman? Bandit leader? The man nodded. Aye, they called her Mora. Said she was once a Nilfgaardian officer. Geralt's brow furrowed. The name tugged at his memory. A whisper from another time, another war. How long ago was this? Yesterday, they took the merchants and the goods. The Witcher stood. Which way did they go? The man blinked. You're not thinking of... Geralt's tone left no room for question. Which way? South, the man said quickly, toward the marshlands. Dandelion sighed heavily. I suppose we're not resting after all. Not if those bandits are killing travelers, Geralt said. Besides, I've heard that name before. Mora fought under the Nilfgaardian banner during the last war. If she's turned brigand, there's a reason. They left before the sky dimmed. The road south led through fields that gave way to tangled forest, then to the edge of the marsh. An expanse of black water and reeds stretching as far as sight allowed. The air grew. Tell me again, Dandelion muttered, swatting at a mosquito. Why we're doing this? We just freed a ghost, Geralt. Isn't that enough adventure for one lifetime? Bandits kill without reason, Geralt said. But a Nilfgaardian deserter with a following, that's not random. It's organized. And we're riding straight into it. Seems so. As the light faded, they reached the ford the traveler had spoken of. The remnants of a wagon lay half submerged in mud. The horses gone, the bodies of guards strewn nearby. Geralt dismounted, crouching to study the ground. Tracks, he said, at least a dozen, moving south by the looks of it. Heavy armor, discipline, not rabble. Dandelion's voice was low. Nilfgaardian training. The Witcher nodded. And something else. Look here. He pointed to a set of prints, smaller, lighter than the rest, barefoot. Someone walks with them unarmed. A prisoner? Geralt's expression darkened. Maybe. They followed the tracks until night fell. The swamp thickened, swallowing sound. Fireflies drifted between reeds, and the air smelled of stagnant water. Then faintly, they heard it. A cry, cut short. Geralt drew his steel sword, motioning Dandelion to stay back. He moved silently through the reeds until the camp came into view. A ring of fires burning low, armored figures seated around them. In the center, bound to a stake, was a man, one of the merchants, bruised and beaten. And beside him, in armor black as midnight, stood a woman. Her hair was white blonde, her eyes cold and sharp beneath the helm. She held herself with the poise of command. "Mercy," the prisoner croaked. "I'll pay." Mora's voice was quiet. "You already did." Her blade flashed once. The man's head fell into the mud. Geralt stepped forward into the firelight. "That's enough." The camp froze. She turned to him slowly, her gaze meeting his. "A witcher," she said. "It's been years since I've seen one." Geralt's grip tightened, killing merchants, raiding roads. Her mouth curved faintly. "You speak of law in a lawless land. Tell me, Witcher, who pays you now? The same lords who let their people starve while they drink wine from Nilfgaardian cellars?" "I'm not here for politics," Geralt said. "Just the dead you're piling up." Mora's soldiers rose, drawing blades. She raised a hand, stopping them. "You think I do this for greed? No. These merchants smuggled slaves, our own people, back to Nilfgaard. I take their gold and free the captives." Dandelion, hidden in the shadows, whispered to himself, "That's actually rather noble for a brigand." Geralt studied her. "And the man you just killed? A spy. He warned the soldiers in Vizima. If I hadn't silenced him, dozens would be taken tomorrow." Her voice was calm, almost weary. "You can fight me, Witcher, but know this, I'm not your monster." The silence stretched, the fire crackled. Finally, Geralt sheathed his sword. "Then stop killing out of vengeance. Leave the north before they hunt you down." Mora tilted her head. "You think I fear them? I've survived worse than kings and their swords." She stepped closer, her gaze hard. "But I'll take your warning. Once more and no further. Leave now, Witcher. This place isn't yours to fix." Geralt met her eyes one last time. "Nothing ever is." He turned and walked back into the mist. Dandelion hurried after him, whispering, "You just let her go? She's not the kind of evil a blade can cure," Geralt said quietly, "and the world's full of worse things waiting in the dark." The swamp behind them swallowed the fires of Mora's camp, and the mist closed in like a curtain. Ahead lay the faint line of the road and the promise of dawn that never quite came. Dawn rose pale and cold over the marshlands, a thin veil of mist lingering above the reeds. The cries of herons echoed across. Geralt and Dandelion rode in silence, the path little more than a ribbon of mud winding through pools that mirrored the pale sky. Behind them, the swamp stretched endless and quiet, hiding the memory of the woman called Mora. The bard finally broke the hush. "You know," he said, when I first met you, I never imagined how many corpses and curses would accompany our friendship. I thought witchers merely slew beasts and collected coin, not ghosts, deserters, and tragic women with swords." Geralt's reply was dry. "You wanted stories. Now you have them." Dandelion sighed. "Oh, I'll have songs aplenty, my friend. Ballads of heartbreak and haunted towers, of noble rebels and cursed love. But do you know what I truly like? A tale where no one dies." Geralt looked ahead. That would be a short one. By noon they reached firmer ground. The marsh gave way to low hills and sparse trees, the faint trace of a road leading toward a cluster of windmills in the distance. Smoke rose from the horizon, too much for chimneys, too black for hearths. Geralt slowed Roach. "Fire, not far." Dandelion shaded his eyes.
Bandits again? Could be, Geralt murmured. Or worse. They approached cautiously. What they found made even Dandelion fall silent. A small hamlet lay half-burned, its houses charred husks, the air thick with the stench of smoke and blood. Crows picked at what the flames had left behind. Geralt dismounted, scanning the ground. No Nilfgaardian banners, no army signs. He crouched near a body. Arrows, short, barbed, elven make. Dandelion swallowed hard. Scoia'tael? The Witcher nodded once. Aye, squirrel commandos. But they wouldn't slaughter peasants like this, Dandelion said uncertainly. Would they? Geralt rose slowly. They would if the peasants were helping Nilfgaard, or if someone wanted it to look that way. The wind shifted, carrying faint sob. Geralt followed the sound, sword drawn, until he found the source. A young woman crouched beside the ruins of a barn. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair matted with ash. She flinched as Geralt approached. Please don't hurt me. I won't, he said softly, lowering his sword. Who did this? Her voice trembled. Elves. They came at dawn. We tried to run, but they set fire to the houses. They said we betrayed them, that we gave grain to the Black Ones. I swear we didn't. Geralt looked at the tracks in the ash. Light, swift, but mixed with heavier boot prints. Humans among them, he muttered. Not all Scoia'tael. Dandelion joined him, expression grim. So what now? Do we chase them? There's no army to report this to. We find them, Geralt said, and we find out why they were here. The girl tugged at his sleeve. There's a cave north of here, near the old quarry. They came from there. I saw them. Geralt nodded. Stay here. Take what food you can and wait until nightfall. Then go east to the next village. Her eyes filled with tears. There's nothing left to take. Geralt's expression didn't change, but his voice softened. Then take your life, girl. That's enough. They rode north through the scorched fields, the path narrowing between rocky ridges. The wind carried faint echoes, voices, laughter, the creak of wheels. As they neared the quarry, Geralt dismounted, motioning Dandelion to follow quietly. The entrance to the cave lay half hidden by brush. From within came the faint glow of firelight. The Witcher crept forward until he could see the camp beyond. Elves and men seated together, their armor mismatched, their weapons crude but well kept. At their center stood a man in red and black armor, his long hair tied back, his bearing unmistakably military. He spoke to an elf woman whose face was streaked with scars. Geralt listened. They'll blame the Scoia'tael? The
peasants' blood will rouse the north against them, and while they tear each other apart, our ships will cross the Yaruga unopposed. The elf's jaw tightened. You promised freedom for my people, and you'll have it, he said smoothly. Once Nilfgaard rules, the elves will have lands of their own. You've seen what your kings offer. Nothing but hunger and scorn. The woman looked away. Your freedom is a leash. Geralt stepped into the open, and one that tightens with every lie. The camp erupted in motion. Swords hissed from scabbards, bows lifted. The Nilfgaardian smiled coldly. Ah, the Witcher. I'd heard you were nearby. Geralt of Rivia, the White Wolf. Geralt's eyes flicked to the man's armor. Officer's plate. You're far from home, soldier. I am far from everything, the man replied. But you stand in the way of a new world. Geralt's hand tightened on his hilt. You burned that village to sow hate. You'll answer for it. Will I? The man said, drawing his sword. History forgets the dead, Witcher. It only remembers those who win. The first arrow flew before he finished the sentence. Geralt caught it mid-flight, deflecting it with a flash of silver. Chaos followed. Steel clashed, fire flared, and Dandelion's horrified shout echoed behind him as the Witcher leapt into the fray. The Nilfgaardian fought like a man possessed, every stroke trained and merciless. Geralt parried, ducked, countered, a deadly dance in the flicker of torchlight. Around them the fragile alliance between elf and man crumbled. Some fled, others turned on each other. "Your people die for a lie," Geralt shouted, forcing the man back. "They die for a cause," came the reply. Their blades met again, sparks showering. At last, Geralt's sword found a gap in the armor, piercing through. The Nilfgaardian staggered, gasping. "You think this changes anything?" "It changes enough," Geralt said, pulling the blade. The scarred elf stared at him, horror and rage twisting her features. "You've doomed us all." "Nilfgaard doomed you long ago," Geralt said. She spat at the ground and vanished into the shadows. When the last echoes faded, only the crackle of dying fires remained. Dandelion crept from his hiding place, clutching his lute as though it might shield him. "Remind me never to doubt you again," he said shakily. "Or at least, never to get close when you start swinging." Geralt wiped his blade clean. "We'll need to bury the bodies." Dandelion groaned. "Must we? There are at least a dozen." 15, Geralt corrected. "And yes." By the time they were done, the sun hung low, painting the rocks red. The Witcher stood a moment in silence, watching the shadows lengthen. "You'll write about this too," he said quietly. Dandelion looked at the fresh graves. "No. Some songs are better left unsung." They left the quarry behind, their silhouettes fading into the dying light. The war, the curses, the endless weight of human cruelty, all of it trailed after them like a shadow that would never lift. And still, as night fell, Dandelion hummed softly under his breath, the ghost of a melody born from sorrow and flame. The next days passed in weary silence. The road wound through rolling plains and half-abandoned hamlets, their fields unplowed, their wells dry. War had left its mark even here. Shattered wagons, burned farmsteads, and eyes that watched from shuttered windows. The world seemed caught between battles, holding its breath before the next wave of ruin. Geralt and Dandelion rode without hurry, though neither could say where the road might lead. The Witcher's thoughts were elsewhere, on Mora, the rebel brigand who fought for a cause that had already died, and on the slain Nilfgaardian whose ambition had cost a village its life. To men like that, he thought, death was not an end, but a tool. Dandelion broke the silence, as he often did. Perhaps the gods made bards so the world wouldn't drown entirely in misery. Imagine it. All swords and curses. No song to ease the sorrow. Geralt grunted. The world would manage. The bard ignored him. But truly, songs matter. They remind people that once things were good, that love existed and laughter. Even you need that gruff as you are. Geralt gave him a look that could have soured milk. "I have roach." Dandelion rolled his eyes. "A horse, Geralt. You can't confide in a horse. She listens better than most humans." The bard sighed dramatically. "You're impossible." They camped that night in a hollow by the riverbank. The water whispered softly among the reeds, and the scent of pine hung in the air. Dandelion busied himself with a small fire, humming as he tuned his lute. When the flames caught, Geralt tossed him a rabbit. "For the stew," he said. The bard grimaced.
One of these days I'll write a ballad about a witcher who cooks for his bard. I suspect it'll sell better than these grim tales you drag me into. Just don't make me rhyme with gallant again, Geralt replied dryly. Night deepened, the stars came out, mirrored faintly in the dark water. Dandelion strummed a soft melody, one of the old ones, a tune that spoke of journeys, of homes left behind and roads yet taken. It was a gentle sound, fragile against the vast stillness of the land. You ever wonder, he said after a while, whether it ever ends? The killing, the curses, the hate? Geralt stirred the embers with a stick. No. The bard gave a tired laugh. At least you're honest. The witcher glanced toward the trees. His medallion trembled faintly against his chest. Someone's watching. Dandelion froze, hand hovering over his lute, as if the strings might turn into a weapon. Bandits again? Geralt shook his head. No. Too light, too careful. He rose slowly, drawing steel. Stay by the fire. He moved without sound, following the faint pulse of danger that tingled through his medallion. Then he saw her, a shape among the pines, cloaked in gray, bow slung across her back. Come out, he said quietly. She did. An elf, tall and sharp-faced, her eyes like the forest itself, ancient and untamed. Her hair was braided with feathers, and her hands, though empty, bore the calluses of a warrior. Witcher, she said, you killed men who served my cause. Scoia'tael? He asked. She inclined her head. Once. Now I lead what remains. Geralt didn't lower his blade. You were the one in the quarry. I was, she said calmly. You struck down the man who sought to free us from the human's yoke. He burned villages to do it. Her expression hardened. War is fire. It devours everything. Do not speak to me of innocence. Geralt's voice stayed level. You came for revenge, then. I came for understanding, she said. He believed in a promise. You ended it. Tell me, what do you believe in, Witcher? He hesitated. In killing monsters, that's all. She smiled bitterly. Then you'll never run out of work. Before he could reply, she turned and melted into the trees. No sound, no trace, only the whisper of leaves left behind. When Geralt returned, Dandelion was pacing in circles. By the gods, what took you so long? I was about to compose my own epitaph. An elf, Geralt said simply. The bard's eyes widened. And she let you live? That's new. She wasn't after blood, not tonight. Dandelion sank down beside the fire, visibly relieved. I hope she doesn't change her mind come morning. Geralt sat, sharpening his sword by habit, though his mind lingered on the elf's words. He'd met too many like her, broken by war, clinging to pride in a world that had none left to give. By dawn they rode on. The forest thinned, giving way to hills dusted with frost. In the distance, smoke curled from a settlement, a modest village huddled beneath a ruined keep. Civilization, maybe even a tavern with proper bedding. As they entered, the villagers watched from behind fences, suspicion clear in their faces. The war had taught everyone to distrust strangers. Geralt guided Roach to the inn, a crooked building with a faded sign depicting a wolf chasing its tail. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of ale and damp straw. The innkeeper looked up from his mugs and froze. A witcher, he said warily, and a bard by the look of it. Dandelion bowed with a flourish. Correct on both counts, good sir. Might we trouble you for food, drink, and a roof? The man grunted. You can if you've coin. They did, barely. As they ate, a group of locals whispered nearby. Geralt caught fragments. Beast, the keep, cattle torn apart. He He set down his mug. "You've a monster problem." The innkeeper glanced at him. "We did. 3 men went up to the ruins to deal with it. None came back." "What kind of beast?" "Something that hunts at night. Leaves no tracks, no blood, just gone. Some say it's a vampire." Dandelion paled. "A vampire? Here? Geralt, tell me we're just passing through." Geralt rose. "Not yet." The innkeeper frowned. "You mean to go up there?" "I mean to look." Dandelion groaned. "And I mean to regret every friendship I've ever had." They reached the keep at twilight. It loomed above the valley like a broken tooth, its towers leaning, its gates half collapsed. The wind whispered through the cracks, carrying faint sounds, scraping, breathing, something that wasn't quite human. Geralt drew his silver sword. "Stay close." "I always do," Dandelion muttered, clutching his lute like a shield. They stepped through the archway. Inside, moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, casting long, cold beams across the floor. Bones lay scattered. Human, animal, difficult to tell. A sweet, metallic scent hung in the air. "Vampire, all right," Geralt murmured. Higher, from the shadows above, something dropped soundlessly, a pale shape, eyes gleaming red. It moved faster than thought, claws slashing. Geralt met it mid-leap, blade flashing. Steel rang, sparks flew. The creature shrieked, recoiling. It was female once, perhaps, its face almost beautiful beneath the monstrous hunger. "Back!" Geralt barked, shoving Dandelion aside as the vampire lunged again. This time he caught her across the chest, silver slicing deep. She screamed, retreating to the rafters, wings spreading wide. "Run!" Geralt shouted, but the bard, for once brave or foolish, raised his lute and struck a chord so sharp it echoed through the ruin. The vampire flinched, just enough. Geralt seized the moment, leaping forward, driving his blade through her heart. The sound that followed was not a scream, but a sigh, long and mournful. The body crumbled to ash. When silence returned, Dandelion was sitting on the floor, panting. "You know," he said hoarsely, I think I'll write a song about that, something stirring. The ballad of the bold and the bloodless." Geralt sheathed his sword. "Make sure you rhyme reckless with pointless." The bard laughed weakly. "You truly know how to flatter." They left the keep under the rising moon. Behind them, the wind carried away the last trace of ash, scattering it over the valley. Another monster slain, another tale half written. And still the road ahead waited, long, uncertain, and dark as ever. They rode from the valley before sunrise, the ruins of the keep shrinking behind them until only the black spire of its tower remained, cutting through the pale horizon like a broken blade. The mist was heavy, curling low over the ground, and the dawn smelled of frost and iron. Neither Geralt nor Dandelion spoke. The night's battle had left its weight upon them, the dull ache of exhaustion, the hollow quiet that followed too much killing. When the road turned east toward the foothills, "We'll reach Caerwedden by tomorrow," he said. "There's a merchant road nearby, safer than the woods." Dandelion shuddered. After vampires, safer is a relative term. I'd prefer a city. A proper one, with wine, warmth, and women who don't have fangs. Geralt's mouth twitched faintly. "We'll see." The bard sighed, tightening his cloak. "You always say that, and it never means yes." They passed through the morning in silence, their horses' hooves muffled on the damp earth. The land rose steadily, the forest thinning into wind-swept slopes scattered with juniper and stone. By noon, they reached a narrow pass guarded by an old wooden bridge. spanning a gorge. The wind howled through it, carrying the distant cry of a raven. Geralt dismounted, testing the planks with his boot. "Old," he murmured, "but it'll hold." "Wonderful," Dandelion muttered. "I'll try to die quietly if it doesn't." Halfway across, the Witcher stopped. His medallion shivered faintly. "Geralt, something's here." The air changed, subtle but enough. The smell of sulfur drifted on the wind. From the cliffs ahead came a low growl, deep and guttural. Then with a clatter of stones, a creature emerged, a massive, four-legged beast, its hide a mottled gray, eyes burning amber. A fiend. Geralt's sword was in his hand before Dandelion could breathe a curse. The beast lowered its horns, scraping the ground. "Back," Geralt said quietly. Slowly, Dandelion swallowed hard. "How far back, precisely?" "Until I say stop." The fiend charged. The bridge shook beneath its weight, planks splintering. Geralt dodged aside, rolling under a swipe of claws that carved deep gouges into the railing. The creature's breath steamed in the chill air, thick with the stench of blood. "Geralt," Dandelion shouted, fumbling for his crossbow. "Do you, need help?" "Don't shoot," Geralt barked, circling. "You'll hit me." The fiend bellowed. Geralt moved just in time as the air shimmered, the hypnotic pulse of its gaze slicing through the mist. He ducked, striking low, silver edge biting deep into muscle. The beast roared, stumbling. The bridge groaned under its bulk. Then a plank snapped. Dandelion screamed as the structure lurched. "Geralt, for the love of—" The Witcher darted forward, driving his blade through the creature's neck. With a final convulsion, the fiend toppled, dragging a section of the bridge with it. Wood splintered, ropes tore, and both monster and timbers vanished into the gorge below. Geralt caught a support beam, swinging himself up onto the remaining span. Dandelion stood on the far side, pale as chalk, clutching his lute like a relic. "Tell me," the bard said faintly, "does death follow you, or lead the way?" "Both," Geralt said, wiping his blade. "Come on, we've lost enough time." They rode on until dusk. The road wound higher through pine forests and narrow valleys where the snow lingered even in spring. By the time they reached Caerwedden, a fortress town perched on a rocky spur, the sky had turned the color of molten copper. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the clang of hammers echoed faintly from the forges below. Dandelion nearly wept with relief. "Civilization," my heart could sing. "Try not to," Geralt muttered. "We need a place to rest, not attention." The gate guards let them through after a brief inspection. Caerwedden was no grand city, only a frontier outpost with cobbled streets, half-timbered houses, and a marketplace that smelled of tallow, horse dung, and cheap ale. But to travelers, it was haven enough. They found an inn by the square, the Iron Hearth, its sign depicting a hammer striking sparks. Inside, the heat was stifling, the air thick with smoke and noise. Soldiers crowded the benches, drinking loudly, their armor dull with wear. Geralt and Dandelion took a corner table. A serving girl appeared. "What'll it be?" "Stew, bread, ale," Geralt said. "And wine," Dandelion added. "If it's drinkable." She raised a brow. "If it's not, you'll drink it anyway." When she left, Dandelion leaned closer. "You know, for once, I'd like to stay somewhere long enough to finish a song before another corpse appears." Geralt didn't answer. His eyes were on the soldiers. One table in particular had gone quiet. A man in dark mail sat there, watching the Witcher with a stare too steady, too deliberate. "Friend of yours?" Dandelion whispered. "Doubt it,"
Geralt murmured. The man rose and approached, his boots heavy on the floorboards. Witcher, he said, voice low. Name's Brenner, captain of the town guard. Heard there's coin to be made for your kind. Geralt's tone was flat. That depends on the work. Brenner leaned in. 2 nights passed, a merchant train vanished between here and the coast. No sign of struggle, just gone. Some say a monster took them. Others whisper something worse. Dandelion frowned. Worse than a monster? Brenner's eyes flicked to him. A witch. Geralt sighed softly. Of course. She lives in the old fort beyond the marsh, the captain said. Anyone who goes near doesn't return. If you deal with it, the council will pay. Geralt considered. I'll look into it at first light. When Brenner left, Dandelion groaned. A witch, Geralt? Haven't we had enough of curses and dead women for one lifetime? Apparently not, Geralt said, finishing his ale. They climbed to their room beneath the eaves. Wind whistled through the shutters, carrying the faint howl of wolves. Geralt cleaned his blades, his motions steady, ritualistic. Dandelion sat at the window, watching snowflakes drift down into the square. You ever think, the bard said quietly, that maybe fate really does follow you? That it leads you from one death to another because someone has to witness it? And I'm fool enough to tag along? Geralt didn't look up. It waits. Dandelion fell silent, staring into the dark. Morning came with a thin veil of frost. The Witcher saddled Roach and packed their gear, while Dandelion muttered complaints about frozen toes and early hours. They rode through the sleeping town, the streets empty but for a few traders setting up stalls. Beyond the walls, the land dipped into marshland once more. A gray, endless plain of waterlogged earth and skeletal trees. By midday they saw it, the ruins of an old fort rising from the mire, its stones black with moss, its towers leaning like drunkards. The air was thick with mist and the smell of stagnant water. Charming, Dandelion muttered. If I die here, Geralt, promise me one thing. What? Don't let the villagers rhyme dandelion with oblivion. Geralt smiled faintly. No promises. He dismounted, drew his sword, and stepped into the mist. Somewhere beyond the fog, a voice sang softly, low, haunting, in a tongue older than men. Dandelion shivered. Geralt? The Witcher didn't answer. He only listened. The song wove through the air like smoke, beautiful and terrible all at once, and somewhere far ahead something began to stir. The voice drifted through the marsh like mist, soft and alluring, yet laced with a sorrow so deep it set the teeth on edge. The Witcher moved soundlessly through the reeds, his boots sinking into the damp earth. Every instinct warned him to turn back. The air itself seemed alive, charged with a presence unseen. Even Roach snorted uneasily behind him, while Dandelion clutched his lute to his chest as though it could guard his soul. The ruins loomed ahead, half swallowed by the mire, a fortress of crumbling stone and ivy-choked arches. The main tower leaned like a dying tree, its reflection trembling upon the stagnant water. The song came from within, now clearer, words threading through the air in the elder speech. It was a lament, though Geralt caught fragments of meaning. Grief, Dandelion whispered. Beautiful and dreadful. Geralt raised a hand. Stay close. Speak softly. He stepped across the broken threshold. The air grew colder. Inside, torchlight flickered faintly from deep within, though no human hand had lit it.
The walls were carved with runes, ancient, older than the conjunction, symbols of binding and despair. The Witcher's medallion vibrated so sharply it stung against his chest. "She's strong?" he murmured. "She?" Dandelion asked, a curse-given voice or something worse. A shadow stirred. From the stairwell above came a whisper, a rustle like silk. Then she appeared. The woman moved with unearthly grace, her form both real and not. Her hair flowed like ink, her skin pale as bone, her eyes black pools that reflected no light. She wore a gown of tattered silver that glimmered faintly with each step. Around her neck hung a pendant, an obsidian shard bound by iron wire. "Who enters my solitude?" she asked, her voice echoing like wind through hollow halls. Geralt straightened. "Geralt of Rivia, Witcher." She tilted her head. "Witcher." The word seemed to taste strange upon her tongue. "They sent one once before he died screaming. I'm harder to kill." A faint smile touched her lips. "We shall see." Dandelion swallowed hard but managed to speak. "We mean no harm, my lady, only peace. The good people of Caerwedden are somewhat alarmed by your song." Her gaze turned upon him, and he froze, as though turned to stone. "My song," she said softly, "is all that remains of me. Would you silence even that?" Geralt stepped forward, drawing her attention back. "You're no ordinary mage. What are you?" "I was," she said simply. "A woman. Once, betrayed, forgotten, left to rot in the mire. My blood sealed this place, and in death, I found power greater than any man's justice." "Your power kills," Geralt said. "Merchants vanish, soldiers disappear. They came to plunder." She let them rot in the mud they sought to claim. Dandelion dared to move, voice trembling. "Surely, vengeance has run its course. The living suffer for sins not their own." She looked at him long, and for a heartbeat, sorrow flickered in her eyes. "You speak with a gentle tongue, Bard. But what does mercy know of betrayal?" Geralt's hand hovered near his sword. "If you want release, I can grant it. Otherwise, I'll end the curse by force." Her laughter was like glass shattering. "You think your steel can cut grief?" The torches flared. Shadows leapt from the walls, ghostly shapes, twisted by anguish, the remnants of those who'd perished here. They surged toward Geralt, clawing with spectral hands. The Witcher drew his silver blade, muttering a sign. The air shimmered blue. The wraiths faltered, their cries filling the hall. Dandelion, heart hammering, stumbled back toward the door. "Geralt!" he shouted. "There are too many!" "Stay behind me." The Witcher's movements were a blur of precision, each strike slicing through mist and darkness, each sign flaring like lightning. Yet for every spirit he banished, two more rose from the stones. "You cannot fight what was never alive," the woman whispered. "Then tell me how to stop you," Geralt growled, parrying a clawed hand that passed through steel like smoke. She smiled faintly. "Break my heart, Witcher. It's buried beneath this tower." And she vanished. The spirits froze, then dissolved into vapor. Silence fell once more, thick as fog. Geralt lowered his sword, breathing hard. "Come on." Dandelion approached warily. "Did she say, break her heart? I do hope she meant that figuratively." She didn't. They descended into the tower's depths. The air grew colder still, the stones slick with moss. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady rhythm, echoing through the narrow passage. Finally, they reached a chamber, sealed by an iron door, engraved with the same runes as before, elder symbols of sealing and sacrifice. This wasn't her prison, it was her tomb. He pressed the sign of Ard against the metal. The door shuddered, groaned, and swung open. Inside lay a small altar of stone. Upon it rested a crystal vessel filled with something dark, neither liquid nor solid, but pulsing faintly as though alive. Dandelion recoiled. "Tell me that's not her heart," Geralt said, "the source of her power." He drew his sword. The silver caught the dim light, gleaming like frost, but as he raised it, a whisper filled the chamber, not cruel now, but pleading. "Do not. I have nothing else. Let me sing. Just a while longer." Dandelion looked at Geralt, eyes wide. "Geralt?" The Witcher hesitated. "If I destroy it, she'll be gone. Forever. She's killing people. She's also suffering." The voice came again, softer. "Once I was called Lysen. I loved a man who promised me eternity. He buried me here when he found it in another's arms. If you take my heart, let it not be for hatred. Let it be mercy." For a long moment, Geralt said nothing. Then he lowered the sword, murmuring words from an old tongue. Words of release, not violence. His hand closed around the vessel. It was cold as death. He crushed it between his palms. Light burst through the chamber, white and blinding. The walls trembled, dust raining from above. When it faded, the vessel was gone. Only ashes remained drifting like snow. A sigh echoed faintly, one of peace, not pain. The oppressive weight lifted. Dandelion exhaled shakily. "So, is it over?" Geralt nodded. "She's free." They climbed back into the dawn. The mist was thinner now, the air clean. The ruins seemed less menacing, almost quiet. As they reached the horses, Dandelion glanced back. "I think I'll write about her," he said softly. "Not as a monster, but as a woman who sang too long to be heard." Geralt mounted Roach. "Make it a short song." "Never. The best songs are the sad ones." They rode away through the marsh, the sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. Behind them, the tower stood silent, its curse ended, its sorrow finally at rest. But as the Witcher looked back one last time, he could have sworn he heard a single note, soft, distant, carried on the wind. Not a lament this time. A farewell. The sun had long since dipped beyond the marsh when Geralt and Dandelion found themselves once more upon the main road. The Witcher rode in silence, the faint creak of Roach's saddle the only sound between them. Behind, the mists of the ruined tower lingered like a memory refusing to fade. The marsh smelled cleaner now, the air lighter, as though the land itself exhaled relief after years of choking grief. For Dandelion, however, the quiet was intolerable. "So," he began, "we've freed a tormented spirit, slain a vampire, crossed blades with bandits, and survived a fiend's charge on a rotting bridge. I'd say we've earned a song in our honor, and perhaps a tavern named after me." Geralt didn't answer. The bard sighed theatrically. "You could at least pretend to appreciate my courage. I did strike a vampire with my lute, you know. That's not something most minstrels can claim." "I've seen you strike tavern owners with it too," Geralt said evenly. "Doesn't make it a weapon." Dandelion smirked, undeterred. "You mock, but one day bards will sing of our deeds, my dear Witcher. Geralt of Rivia, the White Wolf, and Dandelion the Bold. Has a fine ring, doesn't it?" "It sounds like trouble." "Adventure," corrected the bard. "Not trouble." Geralt's eyes flicked toward him. "They're the same thing." The road led them north into forest land. The trees grew taller here, pines mingling with ancient oaks, whose roots coiled over stones like sleeping serpents. The faint murmur of a stream accompanied them. and somewhere in the distance a woodpecker drummed against hollow bark. But Geralt's medallion began to tremble faintly, a warning hum beneath his cloak. He halted. Something's near. Dandelion looked around nervously. Near as in pleasant company? Or near as in claws and teeth? Geralt dismounted, crouching to examine the earth. Tracks, a pair of boot prints leading off the road, fresh, then others beside them, larger, deeper, human-shaped, but wrong in proportion. Human? The bard asked hopefully. Not quite. They followed the trail into the trees. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of wet moss and decay. Soon they reached a clearing, and there the Witcher stopped short. A wagon lay overturned among the ferns, its wheels splintered, its contents scattered. Barrels, cloth, the remains of a horse. Blood stained the earth. But what caught Geralt's attention was the mark scorched into one of the wagon boards. A handprint, enormous and blackened, burned into the wood. Leshen? Dandelion whispered. Maybe, Geralt murmured, but this is wrong. Leshens don't burn. They bind. They mark trees, not wagons. He drew his sword. Stay back. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then came a sound, a low, guttural growl followed by the snapping of branches. The thing that emerged from the shadows was no beast of the usual sort. It walked upright, its body draped in rags, its skin gray and leathery. Where its face should have been was a hollow mask of bone, and from its back jutted two twisted horns black as pitch. It reeked of ash and old blood. Gods preserve us, Dandelion whispered. Run, Geralt said quietly. But the bard, rooted by horror, didn't move. The creature lunged impossibly fast for its size. Geralt met it head on, blade flashing. Steel bit flesh, but the wound only smoked, not bled. The monster's claws raked across his armor, sparks flying. Not steel, Geralt growled, switching blades. Silver. He leapt aside as the creature charged. A pulse of force, Ard, blasted it back against a tree, cracking bark. Yet the monster rose at once, unfeeling, its hollow gaze fixed on the Witcher, its mouth opening in a hiss that sounded almost like speech. Burn. Me, it rasped. Geralt's strike faltered for half a heartbeat. What? Burn. Me. The Witcher narrowed his eyes. Dandelion, fire! The bard, startled but quick, snatched a torch from the wrecked wagon and thrust it toward Geralt. The Witcher caught it, drove it into the creature's chest, and muttered the Ignis sign. Flame erupted. The monster screamed, a sound that chilled the blood, and collapsed into the fire, burning fast, too fast, as though made of tinder. When only ash remained, Geralt lowered his sword. Dandelion exhaled shakily. What in the devil's name was that? Once human, Geralt said. A cursed one, maybe? Fire was the only release it wanted. The bard looked at the ashes, then at Geralt. Do you ever tire of this? The endless curses, the suffering? Geralt sheathed his blade. It's the work. They made camp near the stream, away from the smell of burning. Dandelion cooked while Geralt cleaned his swords. For a time the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the slow rush of water. You know, the bard said after a while, I thought life with you would be dangerous, but not so morbid. Everything we meet either dies, wants to die, or tries to make us join it. That's the continent for you, Dandelion sighed. You really know how to lift spirits? Geralt gave him a look. You wanted a story. Yes, but not one written in blood and ashes. The Witcher stirred the fire with a stick. Stories rarely come from peace. Dandelion stared at him a moment, then plucked a quiet tune from his lute. It was slow, melancholic, the kind of song that would sound better in a tavern after too much wine. Then perhaps
the tale of a cursed man set free, not of a monster slain. Geralt said nothing, but a faint flicker of approval crossed his eyes. They slept in shifts. When Geralt woke before dawn, the world was silvered with dew. He stood by the stream, washing the blood from his gauntlets, when Dandelion stirred behind him. "Morning already?" The bard mumbled. "Tell me there's coffee." Geralt smirked. "There's river water. Drink enough and you'll forget you're tired." Dandelion groaned. "You are a cruel man." They rode again at sunrise. The forest thinned, giving way to open plains dotted with distant farmsteads. For a moment, peace seemed possible, until the sound of hooves behind them broke the calm. A company of riders approached, banners fluttering black and gold, the colors of Nilfgaard. Geralt slowed, watching as they closed the distance. Their leader raised a hand. "Halt!" The Witcher obeyed, wary. The officer who rode forward was young, though his eyes bore the cold certainty of command. "You're far from any border, Witcher. State your business." "Traveling," Geralt said, "nothing more." The officer's gaze lingered on him, then shifted to Dandelion. "And your companion?" "A poet," Dandelion said, bowing with exaggerated grace. "Chronicler of heroic deeds and humble men." The officer sneered. "Then write this. Nilfgaard's reach grows, and soon there will be no place for witchers or bards in our new order." Geralt's tone was mild. "I've heard that before." The officer frowned, uncertain whether it was threat or jest. Then he gestured sharply, and the riders passed on, their banners vanishing into the dust. Dandelion exhaled. "Everywhere we go, the shadow of that cursed empire looms larger. Do you think they'll ever stop?" "No," Geralt said simply. "They'll stop when the world ends, or when there's nothing left to conquer. And us? Where will we be when that happens?" Geralt's gaze turned toward the horizon, where the plains stretched endless under the pale sun. "On the road," he said. "As always." They rode on, the wind rising behind them, carrying the faint scent of smoke and faraway war. The bard began to hum softly, shaping words that might one day become a song. It would not be a ballad of victory nor one of love. It would be a tale of two wanderers bound by fate, one seeking peace he could never find, and the other chasing songs no one would ever truly believe. And as the road vanished into the golden distance, the sound of the lute lingered, fragile, defiant, and endlessly human. The road stretched onward into a vast country of fields and wind. Wheat whispered in the morning breeze, and a pale sun crept through drifting clouds, softening the hard edge of the land. Geralt rode ahead, his cloak rippling, eyes fixed upon the horizon. Beside him, Dandelion hummed to himself, half a tune, half a sigh, strumming idle notes upon his lute. For a time, all was quiet. Then, from far ahead, the road forked, one path bending toward a forested valley, the other to a hamlet of no more than a dozen thatched roofs, and a single stone tower rising behind them. Geralt halted, studying the crossroads. "Which way?" Dandelion asked, his voice cautious. "If it's up to me." "The tower looks less muddy." "The tower belongs to someone," Geralt replied. "The forest doesn't." Dandelion grimaced. "Yes, but the forest might belong to things that eat people." Geralt turned Roach toward the hamlet. "You wanted a bed and food that isn't burnt rabbit." "That," the bard said brightly, "is the finest thing you've ever said." The village was called Cornath, though it could hardly be called a village at all, just a gathering of worn cottages surrounded by thin gray fields.
The folk who watched them arrive were hollow-eyed and silent, the kind who had seen too much.
Geralt dismounted at the small inn, its sign a crude image of a wheel of cheese, half faded by the weather. The innkeeper, a squat man with a beard like coarse straw, glanced at Geralt's medallion and stiffened. "Witcher, we've no need for your kind." Dandelion stepped in with his trademark smile. "Ah, good sir, surely there's always need for coin. And for music, of course. Perhaps a song to warm weary hearts?" The man's expression wavered. "You can sing," he muttered, "but the Witcher pays double." Geralt shrugged. "Fine." Inside, the air smelled of ale and damp wood. A few men sat hunched at the tables, muttering among themselves. Dandelion launched into a tune, soft, melancholy, the kind that makes people remember things they'd rather forget. By the second verse, even the innkeeper's scowl had eased. When the last note faded, a woman approached their table. She was tall, with a shawl drawn close around her shoulders, her face shadowed by the firelight. "You're a witcher," she said quietly. Geralt nodded. "There's something you should see. Out by the tower." Dandelion's fingers froze over his strings. "Ah, here we go again." Geralt stood. "What's the problem?" "Not here," she said, glancing toward the other patrons. "Come when the moon rises." Without another word, she turned and left, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. Dandelion stared after her. "If I had a crown for every mysterious woman who's led us into trouble, I could buy Novigrad." "You could barely buy a drink in Novigrad," Geralt said. "Finish your ale." They waited until dusk. The sun sank behind the fields, painting the sky in crimson and violet. When night fell, they rode toward the tower, following a narrow path through swaying grass. The tower itself was ancient, built of black stone that gleamed in the moonlight like wet obsidian. No fires burned within, no guards stood watch. The woman awaited them at the base, a lantern in hand. "Good. What's this about?" Geralt asked. "Come inside." The interior smelled of dust and old herbs. The woman led them through a hall lined with empty shelves, up a winding stair that groaned beneath their steps. At the top lay a chamber, a study once perhaps, though now filled with cobwebs and broken glass. In the center a table stood, and upon it a bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. Within lay a child, or rather what had once been one, small, frail, perfectly preserved as though asleep. Only the eyes were wrong, open and gleaming faintly with silver light. Dandelion gasped, recoiling. "Dear gods." Geralt's expression didn't change. "How long?" 3 years, the woman whispered. He was my son." The Witcher knelt beside the table, studying the body. The faint hum of magic emanated from it, old and tangled. "You bound him here." Her voice broke. "I couldn't let him go. The fever took him so fast, and when the priest came, he said no rite could save him. But there was another, a traveler, a mage. He gave me a charm, said it would keep him near until I could find peace." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "And you used it?" She nodded, tears glinting. "He told me it would only preserve him, but after a time I began to hear him. At night, whispering, crying. And then he moved." Dandelion took a step back. "Moved?" "He walks the tower," she whispered. "I hear his feet on the stairs. Sometimes I see him by the window looking out. He's not himself anymore. I wanted him close, but now he wants me to join him." Geralt stood. "The charm, show me." She drew a small talisman from her neck, a pendant of bone and iron carved with a rune of binding. He recognized the mark.
Necromantic craft, he said. Forbidden for a reason. Can you stop it? Geralt studied the boy again. I can release him, but you need to leave this place and never look back. Do it. The Witcher drew a small circle of salt around the table, murmuring old words. Detached, measured, the language of separation. The air thickened, heavy with energy. Dandelion felt the hair on his arms rise. Then came the sound. Footsteps above, light as a child's, slow and deliberate. The door creaked open. The boy stood there. His skin shone faintly, his eyes 2 points of cold silver. Mother, he said, voice soft and hollow, you promised you'd stay. The woman sobbed. I'm here, my love. But you're not meant to be. Geralt raised his hand. Stay back. The child looked at him, tilting his head. You'll take her away. She'll follow soon enough, Geralt said gently. But you need rest first. The boy screamed. The sound shattered the lantern's glass. Wind howled through the tower, sending papers flying. Dandelion fell to his knees, covering his ears. Geralt traced the sign of Írden, anchoring the circle with a flash of blue light. The boy froze, trapped within. Forgive me, Geralt whispered, driving his silver sword through the heart that no longer beat. The glow faded. The body collapsed, small and still once more. When the silence settled, the woman crumpled beside the table, her sobs low and broken. Geralt placed the talisman beside her. Bury them both, he said quietly, far from here, and burn the charm. She nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the dawn crept slow and gray. Dandelion walked beside Geralt, silent for once. Only when they reached the road did he speak. You could have refused her. I could have, Geralt said, but she would have tried herself. Or worse. The bard's eyes were tired. Everywhere we go, it's the same. Grief and ghosts. Doesn't it ever end? The Witcher looked toward the rising sun. It ends for them. That's enough. They rode until the tower vanished behind the hills, and as the wind stirred the fields, Dandelion began to play. A quiet melody, fragile as morning light. The notes were all the words the world needed. The days grew longer as spring pressed on. The warmth came slowly to the scarred lands of the north. Geralt and Dandelion followed the river eastward, through meadows, just waking from winter's sleep, past willow groves and ruined farmsteads where only crows made their home. The sun was mild, the wind sharp, and the Witcher's thoughts heavy. Dandelion, as ever, tried to lift the gloom. You know, Geralt, he said one morning as they rode along the riverbank, I sometimes wonder what drives you to keep doing this. The swords, the monsters, the endless graves. You could have been anything. Merchant, mercenary, hermit perhaps. Yet here you are collecting curses like I collect lovers. Geralt smirked faintly, and both of us end up regretting it. The bard chuckled. True enough. But at least I get songs out of mine. What do you get? Peace, Geralt said. Dandelion frowned. You call this peace? The Witcher shrugged. For a while, until the next fight. They rode on in silence until the road turned toward the foothills. There, nestled among pine and stone, lay a settlement. A miner's camp, grown into a rough village called Blackbow Hollow. Smoke curled from its chimneys, carrying the scent of coal and wet iron. The clang of hammers echoed faintly, mingling with the murmur of voices. As they entered, eyes followed them, miners blackened with soot, pausing in their labors to stare. The inn stood near the square, its sign depicting a black boar over crossed picks. Inside it was dim and hot, the air thick with smoke and sweat. Dandelion wrinkled his nose. Smells like hard work and despair. I feel most unwelcome. Geralt ignored him and approached the counter. Ale and information. The innkeeper, a thin man with hollow cheeks, filled a mug without question. Depends on what kind of information. Anything strange lately? The man hesitated. Strange is a daily thing here. Minds collapse, men...
Aye, there's talk. He leaned closer. Something moves in the tunnels. Not rats, not echoes. The miners say they hear voices. Women's voices, singing beneath the stone. Dandelion's brow rose. A charming thought, to serenade death itself. Geralt drank. Any pattern to the disappearances? Always the night shift, always near the lower shafts. Old tunnels from before the war. Geralt nodded slowly. I'll take a look. Dandelion sighed. Of course you will. They waited until dusk before descending into the mines. A foreman, a scarred veteran named Odric, guided them to the entrance. Half my men won't go down there now, he said. They say it's cursed. I say it's superstition, but we've buried 5 this month. Show me the shaft, Geralt said. Odric handed him a lantern. You're mad, Witcher, but if you come back alive, there will be coin waiting. The tunnels yawned, wide and dark. The air was damp, the walls slick with mineral sheen. Water dripped somewhere in the depths, slow and steady. Geralt's medallion trembled lightly as they descended. Dandelion's voice echoed behind him. You know, for a man who dislikes attention, you do everything possible to seek it. Quiet. The bard obeyed, clutching his lute for comfort. They reached the lower tunnels, ancient passages shored with rotting beams. The singing began soon after, faint, lilting, like a lullaby half-remembered. It came from a head deeper in the dark. Dandelion whispered, That's no echo. Geralt drew his silver sword. Stay behind me. The tunnel opened into a cavern, vast and glittering with veins of quartz. In the center stood a pool of still black water. The singing came from its depths. A shape rose from the surface, a woman's figure, pale and luminous, her hair floating like strands of silver light. She smiled, and the air grew heavy with enchantment. A noon wraith, Dandelion breathed. Geralt shook his head. No, a Melusine, a water spirit, bound to the earth. Witcher, do you come to join us? To sleep beneath the water where the pain of men fades? Geralt kept his blade steady. I came to stop you from killing. Her eyes glimmered like moonlit glass. Killing? They came to me first. They broke the stones, spilled blood in my halls. I merely took it back. The miners didn't know, Geralt said. They dig to survive. They dug through my resting place, she said, her tone turning cold. Once my sisters and I guarded these hills. Then men came with fire and steel. They drove us below, buried us. Now I wake, and I find only greed above me. Dandelion stepped forward cautiously. Perhaps there's a way to... Silence, mortal, she hissed. You sing of love, yet you know nothing of loss. The water rippled, and other shapes stirred beneath the surface. Pale faces, empty eyes. Geralt moved quickly, drawing a circle in the dust with his boot. Yrden. The sign flared violet. Stay within the light. The Melusine screamed and the cavern shook. Water surged upward like claws reaching from the depths. Dandelion stumbled, clutching his lute. Geralt, back! The Witcher slashed as she lunged, silver slicing through the illusion that cloaked her. Her beauty shattered, revealing a creature of bone and shadow, her body half decayed, her voice
a chorus of 100 drowned souls. Geralt struck again and again, but her form only dissolved, reappearing behind him. He turned, muttering another sign. Igni. Flames burst from his hand, searing through mist. The spirit shrieked, collapsing into the pool. The surface boiled, then stilled. For a long moment neither moved. Then Dandelion exhaled shakily. Is it over? Geralt watched the water. Maybe, but she wasn't lying. They disturbed something old. He knelt by the pool, scooping a fragment of stone from the edge. A carving, ancient and weathered, depicting 3 women holding a crown between them. The Sisters of the Deep, he murmured. The miners built over their shrine. Dandelion looked uneasy. Then what happens now? Now, Geralt said, standing. We make sure the rest stay buried. He sealed the tunnel entrance with fire and salt, the flames burning blue as the air filled with the scent of scorched stone. When they emerged from the mine, dawn was already breaking, cold and pale. Odric met them at the entrance, eyes wide. Well? Your tunnels are cursed, Geralt said. Seal the lower shafts. Burn the offerings you found there. Odric nodded quickly, pressing a purse into his hand. Aye, Witcher. Whatever you say. As they rode away from Blackbough Hollow, Dandelion glanced back. Smoke from the miners' fires rose into the gray sky like thin ghosts. You know, he said, sometimes I think the world forgets its own past, and we spend our lives cleaning up the pieces. Geralt looked ahead. That's exactly what we do. They rode on. The river wound beside them, whispering its eternal song. And though the land was quiet once more, Geralt knew that peace, like the mist, would not linger long. For in the north, war never truly ended, and monsters, whether born of magic or men, always found their way back into the world. For 2 days, the road wound through a realm of fog and stillness. Rain fell in fitful bursts, drumming softly on cloak and saddle until all sound became part of a single dull rhythm. Hoofbeats, water, breath. The world seemed caught between seasons, neither winter nor spring, barren and gray as old parchment. Dandelion rode with his hood drawn low, muttering under his breath about the cruelty of weather and fate alike. You know, Geralt, he said at last, the poets of Toussaint have it right. They live where the vines bloom, the wine flows, and the only monsters are broken hearts. Why must we always wander through lands that smell of rot and regret? Because that's where the work is, the Witcher replied. Sometimes I think you were cursed to find trouble, and I to follow you into it. They rode on without further talk. By dusk, the path narrowed between ridges, climbing toward a stretch of forest that stood black against the dimming sky. Smoke curled faintly from somewhere within. Not campfire smoke, but the acrid sting of something burning in great quantity. Geralt slowed Roach, his eyes narrowing. Smoke this thick means a village. Or what remains of one, Dandelion murmured. When they reached the edge of the wood, they found it as the bard had feared. A settlement lay below in the hollow, or rather its bones. Houses had been reduced to smoldering frames. Livestock lay slain, and the well at the center of the square was fouled with ash. No living soul moved among the ruins, only crows. Geralt dismounted, drawing his sword without a word. His medallion quivered faintly, responding to the residue of magic in the air. This wasn't war, he said, not bandits, something else. Dandelion hesitated. A monster? The Witcher shook his head. A spell. Strong one. They searched in silence. Near the well, Geralt found footprints, deep, deliberate, Whoever had done this had walked slowly, almost ceremonially, leaving a trail that led toward the forest's heart. Among the ashes, he found another clue, a sigil scorched into stone, a spiral of thorns surrounding an open eye. He recognized it at once. "The Circle of Thorns," he said quietly. Dandelion blinked. "You mean the mage cult? I thought they were destroyed during the last purge." "They were scattered," Geralt replied. "Not destroyed. Some hide in the wilds far from the Brotherhood's reach. They study forbidden arts, necromancy, shadow binding, blood runes, dangerous things." The bard swallowed. "And we're following them?" Geralt looked toward the dark trees. "Yes." The trail led them deep into the woods, where roots rose from the ground. The air grew colder, and the smell of smoke gave way to the metallic tang of old magic. Before long they came upon a clearing lit by dying embers. A circle of stones surrounded an altar, a crude block smeared with blood. Dandelion turned pale. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." "It's a summoning ground," Geralt said, "used recently." Something moved beyond the circle. The Witcher spun, blade drawn, as a figure stepped from the shadows. He wore a cloak of gray feathers, his face hidden by a mask carved from bone. His hands, long and pale, glowed faintly with runes. "I wondered when the wolf would come," the man said. "Your kind always sniffs out the dying embers of power." "Who are you?" Geralt asked. "A student of what men have forgotten," the stranger said. "They burned my brothers, silenced our lore, but the forest remembers, the stones remember." "You slaughtered a village." The masked mage tilted his head. "They were already dead, Witcher, in spirit, if not in flesh. I merely freed what was trapped." Geralt stepped closer, silver blade glinting. "You called something through, didn't you?" "A spirit, a wraith." "Not a spirit," the mage said. "A memory, a fragment of the world before men tamed it." Before Geralt could move, the man raised his hand. The runes upon his skin flared crimson, and the air twisted. From the darkness behind him, shapes began to emerge. Not quite human, not quite beast. They were shadows with form, their edges flickering like smoke in a strong wind. Dandelion stumbled back. "Geralt!" "Stay behind me," the Witcher said, his voice calm. The shadows surged. Geralt's sword cut through one. It screamed, a sound like glass shattering. Another struck from the side, its claws passing through leather to bite at his arm. He countered with Igni, fire bursting from his hand, and two more dissolved into ash. The masked mage laughed softly. "You cannot kill what never lived." "Then I'll kill the one who made them." Geralt charged, the blade flashing in arcs of silver light. The mage raised a barrier, transparent, shimmering, but the Witcher's sign of Ard shattered it like crystal. The bone mask cracked under the flat of his sword, revealing a face gaunt and gray, eyes burning with feverish light. "You can't stop it," the man hissed. "The old world returns, the age of monsters and magic. Men will drown in it again." "Then let them drown," Geralt said coldly, and struck. The mage fell, runes extinguished. The shadows around them unraveled into mist. Silence reclaimed the clearing. Only the firelight flickered against the stones. Dandelion approached slowly, his voice trembling. "Is he—" "Dead," Geralt said, "but not before he tore the veil." Something crossed through. As if to answer, the air rippled. From the altar rose a faint light, coalescing into a shape. Tall, ethereal, faceless. Its voice was not heard, but felt. A pressure in the mind. Why summon, if not to serve? Geralt's grip tightened. "Back!" The figure turned toward him. "You reek of blood and silver. You do not belong to this age." "I belong where I'm needed," Geralt said, raising his blade. The thing reached toward him, its arms stretching like smoke. The Witcher met it with steel. The impact flared blindingly, the world dissolving into light and sound. Then, nothing. When Geralt awoke, the fire was out. The clearing lay still. Dandelion knelt beside him, face pale with worry. "By the gods, I thought you were dead. The thing vanished, just gone, like a dream burned away by dawn." Geralt sat up slowly. His medallion no longer trembled, but the forest felt wrong. Emptier somehow. "It wasn't destroyed," he said, "just sent back." "Back where?" Geralt looked to the sky, now paling with morning. "Wherever it came from. Let's hope it stays there." They buried the mage by the stones without words. The earth was soft. As they turned to leave, Dandelion lingered, gaze on the fallen man's mask. "He believed what he did was right," the bard said quietly. "That he was restoring something lost. Madmen always do," Geralt replied. They mounted and rode on. The forest thinned, giving way to open land once more. Behind them the clearing faded into the mist, its memory swallowed by time. For hours they rode without speaking, until at last Dandelion broke the silence. "Geralt, do you ever think the world might truly be ending? Not with war or fire, but with forgetfulness? With people forgetting what they were and what they should never become again?" Geralt's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "The world ends every day, Dandelion. We just keep walking through what's left." And so they did. Two weary travelers moving through the aftermath of magic and man alike, the road stretching before them like an endless refrain. The bard's lute hung silent across his back, but in his mind the song had already begun. A lament for those who sought to unmake death, and for those who lived to see what followed. The wind rose behind them, carrying away the scent of ash, and ahead lay the faint promise of dawn, uncertain, fragile, and fleeting as peace itself. Dawn broke slow and red upon the horizon, spreading thin light across the hills. The road wound toward a country few travelers sought, wild valleys veiled in mist, where rivers gleamed like silver threads, and the ruins of elder keeps slept half-buried in ivy. Geralt and Dandelion rode side by side, silent save for the creak of saddles and the distant call of crows. The bard had not sung since the forest. His lute hung unused upon his back, its strings dulled with dew. Geralt did not press him. Words were heavy things after nights such as theirs. The Witcher's thoughts lingered upon the mage's dying words. The old world returns. Foolishness, perhaps. Everywhere he went, magic stirred again, restless, untamed, and cruelly alive. By midday, they reached a river crossing, a wide bridge of mossed stone, where traders once passed before war and ruin had emptied the roads. At its far end, smoke rose from a small camp. A solitary traveler sat by the fire, wrapped in a cloak the color of storm clouds. "Another vagrant?" Dandelion murmured. "Or a bandit waiting to rob us blind?" "Only one," Geralt said. "Bandits hunt in packs." They approached. The stranger turned as they neared, revealing a face half hidden by dark hair streaked with white. His eyes were sharp, golden, Witcher's eyes. "Geralt of Rivia," the man said, his voice calm, edged like a whetted blade. "I'd begun to wonder if our paths would ever cross." Geralt dismounted slowly. "And who are you?" "Lucan of Vatberg," he said. "Care Seren." "A fellow Witcher, then, one of the Griffin school." Geralt relaxed fractionally, though his hand did not stray far from his hilt. "You're a long way from the mountains." "So are you," Lucan replied. "I've been following signs of something old, a power moving in the north. They said you passed through. Villages burned, monsters roused, dead that would not sleep. Wherever you walk, trouble follows." Geralt met his gaze evenly. "I walk where I'm needed." "And what of the thing you fought in the forest?" Lucan asked. "The circle of thorns is stirring again. Their rites tear holes in the veil. Whatever they've woken won't die easily." Dandelion shifted uneasily. "I'd rather not hear that part." Geralt's tone remained flat. "I destroyed their leader?" Lucan shook his head. "You destroyed one branch of a rot that runs deep. They're gathering across the Pontar, mages, zealots, and worse. They call it a rebirth. I call it madness." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "You want help?" "I want warning spread," Lucan said. "Tell them this war between kings will mean nothing if the mages unleash what sleeps beneath the world." Dandelion laughed dryly. "You'd be surprised how little kings listen to poets or witchers." Lucan's mouth twitched in something like a smile. "Then sing louder." He turned to Geralt. "There's a fortress east of here, Caer Mellon, abandoned but once built upon elder stones. The Circle seeks it. If they claim it, half the north will burn." Geralt studied him for a moment. "You want me to go there?" "You always end up where the fire burns hottest." Lucan pulled his cloak close. "I'll ride north, warn others of my kind. If you reach Caer Mellon before they do, stop them." With that, he mounted his horse and rode off into the mist, leaving the scent of smoke and iron behind. Dandelion exhaled. Another fortress, another curse, another madman chasing ancient power. I swear, Geralt, the world repeats itself like a bad song. "Then maybe this is the last verse," Geralt said. They followed the road east. The land grew harsher, broken hills scarred by storms, the wind biting through cloak and mail. As night fell, they reached the foothills, where Caer Mellon waited, its jagged towers silhouetted against the rising moon. The fortress loomed like a wound upon the landscape, its gates torn down, its stones slick with moss. They made camp at its base. Geralt sat cleaning his sword by the firelight while Dandelion paced, muttering about mad witchers and cursed castles. The witcher said nothing. He was listening to the whispers that rode the wind, faint and mournful like the echo of forgotten prayers. When the fire burned low, they entered. The great hall stood open to the stars, its roof long since fallen. Statues of armored knights lined the walls, their faces eroded by time. At the far end lay a throne of stone, cracked down the center. Upon it sat a figure, draped in black, motionless. "Geralt," Dandelion whispered, "please tell me that's a corpse." The figure rose, its eyes opened, pale fire burning within empty sockets. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of decay and magic. "Witcher," it said, its voice like wind through hollow bones. "You come unbidden to my hall." Geralt stepped forward, silver drawn. "Who are you?" "I was called Mellon once," it said, "king of this keep. I bound myself to stone and spell to guard what lay beneath, and for centuries I have watched fools dig for power they cannot hold." "The Circle," Geralt said, "they came here. They woke the earth's blood," the revenant hissed. "Now it stirs. I cannot hold it much longer." Geralt's medallion shuddered violently. Beneath the floor came a low rumble like thunder trapped beneath the mountain. Cracks spidered across the stones. Dandelion cried out as the ground split, revealing a chasm pulsing with light. From its depths rose a form vast and formless, raw energy given shape, molten and shifting, a primal elemental born of Earth's forgotten heart. Geralt moved without hesitation. "Out!" he shouted, driving Dandelion toward the gate. The bard stumbled into the courtyard as the fortress shook, towers collapsing in clouds of dust. The Witcher stood his ground before the creature. "You're bound here," he said. "You were sealed for a reason." The elemental's voice was thunder. "All bonds break, all fire burns free." Geralt drew a circle with salt and steel, his signs glowing bright in the swirling dark. Yrden to bind, Quen to shield, Igni to burn. The air howled as he fought, a lone figure against a storm of flame and shadow. The Revenant King watched from the throne, his skeletal face lit by the chaos. "End it, Witcher, break the Heartstone." Geralt saw it then, the crystal lodged within the creature's core, pulsing like a heart. He lunged, rolling beneath a wave of molten light, and drove his sword deep. The explosion that followed split the night. When silence returned, the fortress was half. Only ashes and the faint scent of ozone remained. The Revenant King slumped upon his throne, his duty complete. "The seal holds again," he murmured. "For now." Geralt bowed his head. "Rest." The figure turned to dust. Outside, Dandelion ran to meet him, eyes wide with relief. "You're alive. I was just composing your elegy." "Save it," Geralt said. "We're not done yet." "Not done?" the bard groaned. "We've slain ghosts, ended curses, buried kings. What more could possibly remain?" Geralt looked toward the east, where dawn was breaking once more over the wreckage. "Tomorrow always remains." Dandelion followed his gaze, then sighed and strummed a tentative chord. The sound drifted through the ruined courtyard, soft as morning light. And there, among crumbling stones and fading fire, the Witcher and the bard rode on once more, two wanderers bound by the endless road, their shadows stretching long behind them, toward a world forever waiting to be saved again. The wind carried their passing like a whisper across the hills. For a time peace lingered, then far away a storm began to gather anew.